From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. But who really cares? It's what they do best. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham. Okay, now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
Nothing like a little mystical to get your high school football week started. We've got two days away from Friday, the second Friday of the season. I'm excited. I know you are. I'm Clint Buckley with ETSN.fm, and we got Mike Graham with us, my partner in crime for this year. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, doing good. Excited about this. Excited it's week 2 finally.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about this week. We're going to try to condense it all down into about 20 minutes. First things first, though.
Time to dwell on the past.
We got to talk about week 1. A lot of surprises. A lot of scores that maybe didn't surprise us, but there were tons of stuff that happened on the field last Friday night that kind of took both of us by surprise. And I guess we'll start right off the bat with the game that you were at last week. It was our game of the week. It didn't turn out to be much of a game. That was Longview at Lufkin. I was kind of surprised at the way Lufkin kind of dominated the action.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise to see Longview go down like that. It was a 44-14 final score, and it was about as bad as it sounds. But I was excited about Lufkin and what the Pack has. Obviously, they got a really good quarterback in Trey Cumby, perhaps a baseball guy, but it looks like he's got a good football future if he wants to go that way too. Threw for, I think, 300 yards, somewhere in there. Obviously, Kiki Kuti is a fantastic receiver. I think everyone knows about him and how explosive he is. Then on the other side, at the other receiver position, they've got Terry Mark, who I think is probably the best-looking athlete on the team. Just
he's committed to Houston, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. His combination of height and size is certainly impressive. But I think that the real key to their success this season is going to be the running back Steven Soul, and he carved up Longview on Friday night, and it was good to see if you were a Panthers fan, but you've got to be concerned if you're Longview now.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next point. I know it's only week 1, but you've seen Longview 2 weeks in a row now. You saw the scrimmage at Ennis a couple of weeks ago. You saw them last week. Is it too early to kind of hit the panic button for Longview, or do you think that there's a legitimate concern there?
I think there's a legitimate concern, especially considering that you've got John Tyler this week. I think that.
Yeah, we'll talk in depth about that later on, but go ahead. Longview's.
I think Longview's a playoff team, and I think they'll figure it out as this season goes on. But right now, they can't throw the ball, and they're turning the ball over on the ground. They're leaving their defense on the field way too long. And these are the kind of results they can expect when they do those kinds of things against the best teams in East Texas.
Next up on the list, John Tyler over Plano. I tell you what, the first half of this game I was bored. I was bored to death. It was 0-0. The two teams combined didn't get over 100 yards of offense in the first half. Very sloppy. And unlike a lot of the games in the area, it really wasn't affected by the weather. We didn't see any precip in Tyler on Friday night. No delays or anything like that with lightning. And it was just really odd to see. I know it's the first game, and sometimes the offenses are a little sluggish to start off with, but it was bad. Fortunately, in the second half, things started to pick up a little bit, and the one thing that stood out to me the most in that game, John Tyler won 30-12, was the defensive performance by John Tyler, in particular their rush defense. And I remember talking to Ricklin Holmes, their third-year head coach, after the game, and he said that was one of their big goals, the coaching staff in the offseason, was to improve John Tyler's rush defense, because as good as they've been as a team over the last half decade or so, they've struggled stopping teams on the run. A lot of people will remember their semifinal 2 years ago against Denton Geyer. I think Geyer put up something like 500 rushing yards. Of course, they had Gerard Hurd, who is now could be a starting quarterback in the near future at the University of Texas. And that's one thing that Holmes preached after the game is how much they focused on becoming better against the run in the offseason. And he said that was our first test Friday night, and they passed. They held in the first half. I think Plano had minus 17 rushing yards. Of course, a lot of those were sacks, and Plano made some mistakes by putting the ball on the ground on the snap, and the quarterback was kind of running for his life. But they held their good running back, Brandon Stevens, a junior, who I believe has offers from Ohio State and Wisconsin. Aside from one touchdown run of 75 yards, he picked up 19 yards on his 9 other carries. Yeah. So they did a really good job defensively against Plano, and that's one thing that really jumped out to me. Another I won't call it a surprise. I think we both kind of felt like Texas High had a slight edge over White House last week, but White House goes on the road, picks up a big quality win against Texas High, and it's in a place that's not not easy to win games, and they scored with less than a minute left, win 38-35. I was surprised, not so much that they won, but just the way they were able to do it. I mean, they put up offense like they always do.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think that going into the season, a lot of people were concerned about losing Patrick Mahomes and then the supporting cast like Jake Parker. Those guys have been around for a long time, and now it's Jackson Allen's ship to sail, and he did really well in his first varsity start. And that's a guy I really like. He's just a guy that exuberates a lot of confidence and seems to really care about football, and he did a good job leading them. And then obviously Dominic Hawley at the end with the score. That's a kid we really like, and we were really happy to see that
Superman, right?
Yeah.
That's what he goes by on Twitter. I remember when they came up for photos up to our studio during the summer, he had the Superman sweatbands on his arm. So yeah, he's a good kid. And another guy I want to talk about real quick in that game, Vincent Dunning. I think he had 150, 160 yards on the ground. White House not used to putting up that many 100-yard rushers in the past, and maybe we saw kind of a different element of the offense that might come through this year. And we talk about Jackson Allen, and he still put up great numbers, over 300 yards passing, but they have a solid running game that they can turn to as well this year, and I think that's something that we might be able to see from them in the future. On the other side, Texas High. A little bit of an injury concern moving forward. Their star running back Javon Thomas didn't play in the second half. Had an undisclosed injury, and that was after he had a great first half. Mm-hmm. I think he had like 15 carries for 130 yards, something like that. So it would have been interesting to see if he had played in the second half, how much difference that would have made. Also, too, I saw on Twitter that Dale Williamson, their really good receiver DB, who I believe is committed to South Dakota, an FCS school. He may not be able to play this week against Arkansas High. I'm not exactly sure what the injury is, but those are two guys that Texas High has got a lot of good players around those two, but those two guys are pretty important, and it'd be a shame if those two guys were kept out for an extended period of time, because I think they're going to end up being important to what Texas High does this year. Now on to our next game from last week that we're going to talk about, Gilmer and LE. I was at this game, and for those of you who didn't know about the Blake Lynch situation, he came from Troop. He was their quarterback for the last 2 years, the Baylor commit, most likely a receiver safety type at the next level. And boy, what a first impression he made at Gilmer. He scored touchdowns on his first 3 touches, and in fact his only 3 touches of the game. They really didn't need to use him a whole lot after about the first quarter, because they were up 28-0 and 42-0 early in the second quarter. But Blake Lynch, he was impressive. His second play of the game, he was lined up at quarterback. They ran a little zone read play. He read the defense, pulled it back from the running back, and then the Red Sea parted. It opened up, and Blake Lynch goes 54 yards to the end zone for a touchdown. And then on their next possession, they put him back at quarterback when they're inside the 5-yard line. Takes the snap, goes into the end zone, and then I think 2 possessions later, he gets loose across the middle of a field, catches the ball about 15 yards downfield, and then sprints to the end zone for a 29-yard touchdown. So big opening or debut performance for Blake Lynch at Gilmer. Of course, he isn't the only one. They've got a ton of skilled players at Gilmer, and it's not a lot of 6A or 5As can boast the kind of skilled players that Gilmer has. And you talk about Blake Lynch, but then you look at their other receivers. Chris Boyd, who played almost exclusively at running back last year, is now lined up at receiver almost the entire game. Then you have Chase Tate, a 3-year starter, who's not very big, but is very fast. And then you have Quinn Fluellen and Nick Smith, 2 guys that are I would deem maybe possession guys, guys that'll get tough catches on first down, whereas you have Chase Tate and Chris Boyd and Blake Lynch to a degree as the home run hitters, so to speak. So I just can't wait for you to get to see Gilmer because I've seen him twice. I saw him in a scrimmage against White House, and then I saw him last week against LA. You're gonna have fun watching Gilmer this year.
You stole my point. I think that they might be the most athletic team in East Texas, and they're in the new Class 4A. So I think that they're looking really good right now. And another guy I'd like to mention is their quarterback, McLean Carter. I think
absolutely. Yeah.
I think he's a really strong quarterback. I think he's someone. I'm not sure about his college future right now. I'd like to take him if I was a college coach, but I think that he's certainly going to be someone that the East Texas fan base is pretty familiar with as they make a deep run to the playoffs. I think we can say that they look good for that kind of year. So that was exciting to see them take their first step on Thursday night.
Yeah, most definitely. I think Carter had 5 touchdowns in the game. And now on to the last little bit of information from last week. Last year's 3A Division I state title participants had a rough beginning, especially Carthage, the defending champs, going down 52-20 at Hallsville, and then Kilgore makes a valiant effort to come back and take the lead late in that game at Nacogdoches, only to see Nacogdoches drive with less than 2 minutes down for the game-winning field goal as time expires. So 0-1 starts for both Carthage and Kilgore. I do not believe it's time to push the panic button for either one of those two teams. A lot of turnover, especially on offense for Carthage. They'll eventually get it figured out. Kilgore, it's impressive what they were able to do coming back. I mean, they were down 24-6 at one point in that game against NAC, and then I believe scored 19 unanswered points to go up 25-24 and were in position to win that game, and that would have been huge. For Kilgore to have gone down there to NAC, a team in 5A that's planning on doing some big things, to go down there and get a win. So, whereas Carthage, I think people were shocked by how much they lost. Hallsville, Hallsville's a good team. I mean, they're going to be right in the mix for a playoff spot in 15-5A, and it was on the road. A lot of new starters for Carthage, so I kind of give them a pass. And Scott Surratt has had history with this in the past, replacing. Or having wholesale changes he's had to deal with. So I don't really put a whole lot into both of those losses, but it's still interesting to see both of those teams, struggle in week 1.
Yeah, especially Carthage. They returned 5 starters from their state championship team and lost, most of their key contributors from the state championship team. And right now their running game is just non-existent. 88 yards on 21 carries and 2 fumbles in the process, so they're not helping things. And it's going to take time for the running backs and the offensive line to adjust. In the meantime, good quarterback performance from Jared Blissett, who threw for 251 yards and completed 50% of his passes in his first varsity start. I think that's a good starting point for him. Got an absolute cannon. I think that he can help them through this process. They might not look so good through the non-district, but they'll have things sorted out by district play. We're not concerned about them making the playoffs or anything like that right now.
All right, now it's time to look ahead.
What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?
First on the agenda for this week, I'm excited about this one. John Tyler and Longview. Even though it's the second straight week I've seen JT, I'm interested to see how they move forward after the impressive win against Plano in week 1, and then for Longview, they're going to be trying to pick up the pieces from last week and try to show that that last week's ugly performance in Lufkin is in the past. And I think a big key to this game will be the aforementioned JT Rush defense against Longview's running game. You saw Longview; they were still able to run it pretty well, right?
Yeah, they were when they weren't fumbling. Tylen Miller had a fantastic game, over 100 yards, and really their workhorse right now. We don't know what Jamichael Hasty's.
All we know is is indefinitely out, and I believe we heard something last week that said he'll be reevaluated in 6 weeks.
Yeah, so it's not looking good early for Hasty and getting him going. So Miller's the guy, and Miller's fantastic, and their offensive line is pretty good. Really, the thing hindering Longview right now is their passing game. They haven't found the receivers yet. You might start thinking about moving Des Chumley to receiver. I think he's someone that could have a lot of success even on the next level,
especially considering the talented skill on the outside that they lost in graduation.
Yeah.
I mean, no Dorian Leonard, no Jordan Whitaker, no Chris Pelham. Those were their 3 leading receivers last year, and they had built a lot of trust up with Desmond Chumley over the previous 2 years, and now they're gone. So Chumley has a lot of inexperience out there at receiver, so that may be contributing to their struggles as well.
Exactly, and Chumley's best performances have been just when he hits the open field and running in for 18-yard touchdowns, 12-yard touchdowns, things like that. I think that might be a good fit, and I really like their backup, Cameron Castleberry. I think he could come in and handle that. But we'll see what they do in this game. And like you said, a very strong John Tyler defense awaiting them on Friday night at Lobo Stadium.
Exactly. That'll be fun. And like I said, that's our DQ game of the week this week. I'll be there at Lobo Stadium. Next on the list, Nacogdoches at Hallsville. 2 1-0 teams going up against each other, and 2 teams that, as we said before, knocked off the reigning state title game participants in Week 1, and now they're meeting each other on the field. And I think, while this is important for both teams involved, Nacogdoches and Hallsville, I also think it'll say a lot about where the District 9 4A D1 is early on, because you'll get to see how those losses from Week 1 look after these 2 teams play each other. You know what I'm saying, for Carthage and Kilgore.
Yeah. I think I've wanted for a long time to just talk about the Nacogdoches secondary, because it's fantastic. You've got Jalen Lane, the senior cornerback transfer from San Angelo Central. He's got 38 scholarship offers to lead the East Texas class of 2015. You got safety Brandon Jones, a junior, who leads the class of 2016 in scholarship offers, picked up offers from Texas and Arkansas.
That's right.
On Monday. You got Jalen Lane's little brother at the other safety spot, Corey Lane. He's got an offer from Louisiana Tech. And then I think we really like Tay Forrest, who's the
other corner.
out.
Yeah.
He came to the ETSN Combine in June and performed very well. And that teams are going to be throwing at him a lot, trying to avoid Lane's side of the field, so he'll get a lot of work. But Wyatt Wolverton for Hallsville did.
He did a number on Carthage last week, didn't he?
And I'm excited to see how that game goes, because he threw for a serious chunk of yardage against a pretty good Kilgore defense. A defensive tradition.
Carthage,
yeah, same thing.
Right.
Interchangeable words.
Red
right?
Bulldogs. Yeah, it's all the same. Don't tell either of the communities that, but. I see where the confusion comes in. For sure.
Yeah, they look good. So it'll be exciting to see what Hallsville is able to do against that secondary, and likewise what Nacogdoches quarterback Hunter McClellan and those guys can do on offense against a Hallsville group that really dominated in their game Friday.
Another 1-0 versus 1-0 matchup this week is kind of intriguing to me. It's Atlanta at Henderson. Both of these teams had pretty impressive Week 1 wins. You talk about Atlanta, they just blew out New Boston 41-7. Mm-hmm. New Boston, of course, reached the 2A Division I state semifinals last year and had a bunch of pieces coming back. And Atlanta, they were a playoff team in 3A last year, got to the second round, just got beat out by Gladewater. I think the score was 34-33 in the playoff game. And then Henderson, they snapped Athens' 13-game regular season winning streak on the road. They won 36-20, but I believe the score makes it sound a little bit more competitive than what it really was, because I think at one point Henderson was up by maybe another touchdown or two during the game. So both teams with impressive performances, and I'll tell you what, whoever comes out of this game victorious is going to be looking pretty good at 2-0.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that both teams have done a good job so far. I really like Zane Bowles from Henderson. He's got great size. And
he's not afraid to take off with the ball.
No,
he's a pretty good athlete. He showed that at our combine. I think he had one of the top vertical jumps out of anybody, not just the quarterbacks at our combine, and he can run too. So he's 6'5", 215, but don't let that fool you. He'll tuck it and run, and he's a big target to try to bring down the open field.
And they look good overall. And what they did to Athens was troubling, especially when you like you said, factoring in the defensive. What they were able to accomplish on defense. Then Atlanta obviously has some firepower.
Not surprised that they beat New Boston, but surprised at the margin of victory. 34 points. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And they've got a good quarterback in their own, and Chase Musgrove, who is a multi-sport star there at Atlanta. He's also a good baseball player. He had a big game last week against New Boston. This is really interesting. There's so many good games across East Texas. I wish that we could be at all of them.
Yeah.
This is definitely one that if there wasn't a JT Longview matchup out there, I might consider going to. And then that brings us to our last game we want to talk about. Another one that I know you and I are both excited about, and that's a small school battle between Tenaha and Brook Hill Friday night in Bullard.
Yeah, that's the number 1 team versus the number 2 team in our ETSN Class 2A and private school poll. And one that I really wish I could make, and I know you do too. Tenaha just waxes Joaquin, and that was a little bit surprising to me. I thought Joaquin matched up pretty evenly.
And those are rivals. So,
yeah.
And typically, rivalry games are played close, no matter how big the discrepancy is as far as talent level goes. But Tenaha took care of business, and Kobe Caraway, the running back, 19 carries, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's a great player. I mean, he may be the best running back in all of 2A in the state of Texas. I mean, he came to our combine, wasn't intimidated by the other guys that come from bigger schools. Tenaha is one of the smallest schools we cover in East Texas, and I'm not going to compare him to Reggie Davis because Reggie Davis is one of those guys that comes around once every 20 years or so in a town like Tenaha. He's much like Chavis McAllister was, their quarterback from a decade or from a generation prior that won them a state title. But Kobe Caraway is that kind of player for Tenaha. He's electric. He's a two-way star. He plays really good defense at safety, and he's one of the fastest players in East Texas, bar none. I mean, he ran a 4.4 40 at our combine, and he's definitely a threat to take it the distance every time he touches the ball. On the other side, Brook Hill. This is what's interesting to me about this game. Brook Hill throws for over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns in their win against Edgewood, 49-42. So obviously the passing game is a big part of what Brook Hill does. Tenaha played Joaquin last week. Joaquin attempted 5 passes.
Yeah.
So Brook Hill threw for more touchdowns than Joaquin had pass attempts. So this will be interesting to see how Tenaha's defense prepares week to week.
Yeah, you've got to think about Brook Hill too, giving up 42 points. Just tit for tat in that game. So it's going to be exciting to see, and I think that Tenaha will obviously try to see what they can do on the ground before putting it in the air. That's their strong suit. But if they do put it in the air, like you said, Brook Hill, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, Brook Hill, Edgewood, I believe, threw for a bunch of yards in that game, too. I think their quarterback, Jackson Tyner, was up over or close to 300 yards passing. Tenaha, you're right. They do like to run the ball first. They're a run-first team, and why wouldn't they be with Kobe Caraway back there? But they did throw 2 big play touchdowns last week against Joaquin, too. Their quarterback, TJ Thomas, and their receiver, DeAndre Thomas, hooked up for a couple of touchdowns, and I think DeAndre finished with 5 catches for 107 yards and a couple of scores. So, and then Brook Hill, we look at the passing yards. Yeah, I mean, they're going to throw the ball. They've got a good quarterback in Grant Hanks and several good receivers led by Seth Brazier, the junior, who's probably going to be one of the best recruits in the 2016 class in East Texas. But they're capable of running the football. I mean, they've got Ty Brown at running back that they can run. They got Gabe Lucio, who's a productive runner as well. So if Tenaha does tighten up in pass coverage and plays that better than Edgewood did last week, I mean, Brook Hill's not going to be thrown off by that. I don't think. I think they're going to go to the run, and I think they're going to have success because they've got an experienced offensive line in front of them. So very excited about this game. One of those games I wish I could go to, but I can only be at one place at one time. Same for you.
Yeah,
but
if you're an uncommitted fan in Tyler, go to this game. Go to Brook Hill and watch this game.
An interesting note about this one, it's a 7 p.m. kickoff, not 7:30. So, get out there a little bit early if that's where you're headed Friday night. All right, we're gonna wrap things up here. First of all, we want to send congratulations out to our first ETSN.fm and Dairy Queen Offensive and Defensive Players of the Week. The Offensive Player of the Week, we mentioned him earlier, is Grant Hanks from Brook Hill.
Yeah, Grant Hanks, great job on Friday night against Edgewood. You had to score quite a few times to put them away, 49-42, and you did that with 6 touchdown passes and more than 400 yards passing. 200 of those to Seth Brazier
who easily could have been our player of the week as well.
Yeah.
10 catches, I believe, 211 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, obviously that connection is going to be something special the rest of the year, I believe.
Yeah, so great job to those guys. Without them, they'd be on the losing side of that, and maybe the Tenaha-Brook Hill game wouldn't have as much hype as it does.
Exactly, and shout out to our defensive player of the week, and that's Bryson Gibson from John Tyler. A safety came up huge. Everybody talks about Ike Warren and the JT secondary, but Gibson kind of sparked JT, especially in the second half. The first touchdown of the game was a defensive score, a 50-yard interception return that he had. Put him up 7-0, and then JT's offense kind of finally got in gear, scored on their next 2 possessions, and then to put the game away late in the fourth quarter, Gibson picks up a fumble and goes 20 yards to the end zone. So he scores twice on defense. And there were lots of other good defensive performances around East Texas, but you get in the end zone twice as a defender. That's pretty hard to beat. So congrats to Grant Hanks from Brook Hill and Bryson Gibson from John Tyler, our first ETSN.fm Dairy Queen offensive and defensive players of the week. And we have some previews up already on our website. Be sure to check that out at ETSN.fm. We'll be previewing several games throughout the area. And then if you have any questions or comments for either one of us, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Clint Buckley, and Mike, you are...
Mike_ETSN.
That's right. So at Mike_ETSN if you want to get in touch with. Yeah, exactly. With Mike Graham or myself on Twitter. All right, folks, that's going to do it. You guys have a safe weekend and have fun watching football this week, and we'll be back with you all next week.
Go Cowboys.
Here I go, here I go, here I go.